So here we are, The Enemy of the World, a serial notable for the fact that it's the most recently recovered complete serial, with being discovered back in 2011 and returned in 2013. Once more, David Whittaker returned to write another script for the show, with this being a very different story about a man who wants to rule the world, without any aliens anywhere. So let's see how good this serial is, and if after many years of being lost, it proves better than the soundtrack which survived. So we begin on the beach with the TARDIS landing and the Doctor immediately taking the opportunity to go for a swim, much to the shock of his two companions. But this cheerful atmosphere is soon ruined when they're attacked, but the trio is saved by a helicopter piloted by Astrid, who takes them to her base of operations, after a minor skirmish at her house where the helicopter explodes when the attackers attempt to pursue them in it. So that's a sum up of the first half of episode 1, and I've left out a lot of the details as the explanations come in the second half, when we get introduced to Giles Kent. Kent is the one who introduces Salamander to the trio, but we'll get to him in a minute as there is one important detail for the moment, that being that the Doctor heavily resembles Salamander. Due to this resemblance, the trio were attacked by the three men, who in fact work with Astrid and Kent, with them trying to prevent the attack but failing, which is why they pursued Astrid and tried to kill her as well. The three pursuers aren't very important, they didn't listen to orders and that got them killed, with them not being mentioned again in the serial. In fact, anyone outside of Astrid and Kent within the organisation who opposes Salamander is basically non-existent. There are people who assist them, but they're mostly officials who oppose Salamander, rather than smaller people who act more like soldiers. This isn't a massive problem, but it does somewhat make the group opposing Salamander feel smaller in the grand scheme of things than perhaps intended by the opening scenes. So let's get on to Salamander himself. So as explained before, he heavily resembles the Doctor. How heavily? Well, it's Troughton with his face darkened with makeup to look Mexican. Well, I think Mexican because the accent Troughton gives him does not convince me, and apparently during rehearsals it was even more off. Either way, this is what we've got, and it's very iffy from both the perspective of the serial itself, as the Doctor actively darkens his skin to resemble another ethnicity, which has probably not aged well, and from the production perspective, as why was there any need for the doppelganger to have a different skin colour in the first place, which kind of detracts from the whole doppelganger idea in the first place. So returning to Salamander, he is a man who wants to rule the world for no reason other than he just wants power. He is seemingly able to predict natural disasters, which nobody else can, and is able to influence almost every leader of the world, with him nearly being all powerful by the beginning of the serial. So this does make Salamander a big threat, and through the serial he can feel like a terrifying force. He is not a maniac, instead being calm and collected for almost the entire serial, but there are a few moments where this exterior breaks down towards the end. There is something unnerving about him when he's talking with people, but I think that's mostly due to his accent. He's not at all a bad villain, and being a purely human threat is something we haven't seen from the show in quite some time, with the last time probably being the War Machines, and even then it was a computer and not a human as the villain. Now there is a twist in the serial during the second half which does change the game a bit, and so I'll hold back on that and talk about the opening half of the serial, which is set in Europe. With the Doctor bearing such a close resemblance, the others decide that he must impersonate Salamander, which is something he isn't on board for, but is forced to do temporarily when the leader of World Security shows up, this being Donald Bruce, who is the man who replaced Kent after Salamander forced him out. Now despite having basically nothing to work on for his impression, and even his skin tone being a different shade, this performance does trick Bruce, even if he does get suspicious about it a bit later. This leads to several episodes of the Doctor waiting around for proof before he impersonates Salamander, as what evidence Kent has isn't substantial enough for him. So the majority of the first half of the serial is Jamie and Victoria in the European zone with Astrid. Jamie pretends to save Salamander from a bomb so that the two of them can get jobs in his private residence, with Jamie as a security guard and Victoria as a cook. The Doctor barely appears in these episodes, with Troughton playing Salamander for the majority of it. There is the occasional scene with the Doctor and Kent, but they're brief. A decent chunk happens in these episodes, with a lot of characters being introduced, many of which are only important for these episodes. They are mostly here to show how evil Salamander is, and that he doesn't leave a paper trail, or at least an easy one to follow, plus how he has the power to destroy entire people's lives. While not dull, these episodes do feel a bit empty as the Doctor is just sort of around doing nothing. It's a bit like the War Machines in that regard, as in that the Doctor spent a lot of time in a single room, but in that case it was a short time period compared to basically half the serial of the Doctor doing nothing. Now there are the occasional encounters with some of Salamander's men, notably Bennick, but the Doctor doesn't interact with him, nor does his presence really do all that much to change the Doctor's thoughts on the situation, although it does give us this line.
Sad, really, isn't it? People spend all their time making nice things and other people come along and break them.
For the most part that's all the Doctor does while the rest of the trio are in the European zone. Outside of Salamander and a few characters who only appear briefly to build him up, the most notable character introduced in this section of the serial is Farah, who is Salamander's food tester. So she is one of the more interesting characters in the serial, as we learn that she didn't want to work for Salamander and instead has to work for him, although there's no explanation or reason given as to why. Like, is it because she needs the money to feed her family, or does Salamander have something on her like others? I assume the latter, but what would be a great bit of characterisation is left out, which is really unfortunate. It means that we don't really know anything about Farah other than she has to work for Salamander for unknown reasons. She does defect from him to help the Doctor and co, with her being killed in the process. The other notable character introduced to during this time is the cook, Curly. Now while I say notable character, he's only in a few scenes in the episode set in the European zone, but he's the best character in the serial. He's a comedy character with a depressing outlook on life, which makes all of his lines pure gold. I wish I could just show you every scene he's in, but I can't, so here's just one or two.
Terrible.
Terrible. I'll get the sack tonight, I swear I will. Maybe they'll shoot me. I won't have to worry anymore. No, they wouldn't do that. The firing squad would miss me. This is just about the end of a perfect day. Here, I know the food's bad, but you don't have to go that far.
That basically wraps up the events in the European zone, with the action moving back to the Australasian zone. The Doctor is finally on board at the end of episode 4, finally having some proof which he got from Farah. During this time, Jamie and Victoria are held captive by Salamander, after being caught out in episode 3. This is convenient as it allows Fraser Hines and Deborah Watling to take a week holiday. This leaves episode 4 mostly focused on the Doctor preparing to impersonate Salamander, while Bennick tries to capture and kill him and the others. This is also where it's revealed that Bruce has doubts and is suspicious of Salamander, and so works with the rebel group to find proof. This leads to him reuniting with Jamie and Victoria in Salamander's research facility, with the Doctor tricking the two of them into believing he's Salamander to give up information, which is proof for Bruce. From there they try to find Salamander and confront him about his crimes, but he's locked himself in the record room and can't be accessed by anyone. This leads into a big reveal about being that underground, Salamander is keeping a group of humans in a bunker, with them believing the planet has been destroyed, with them being the ones who caused the natural disasters which Salamander has predicted. Now the twist is interesting, but the execution of his plotline is very underwhelming, with it just stopping later on. By stopping I mean that the people are left in a state where they're trapped due to an explosion, with the recovery happening after the serial has finished. They're just there to both make Salamander more evil and to give a reason for his ability to predict the unpredictable. In the bunker there are 3 notable characters, with one of them wanting to return to the surface, which Salamander refuses due to the dangers above, with him pretending to be braving the conditions of the surface to keep them safe. This does lead to a reveal that Salamander has taken people up before and killed them, with him killing Swan when he's forced to take him up, but it doesn't mean that much, as we've only just met these characters and we don't get their return to the surface at the end. It just feels like a way to villainise Salamander further, but given that the characters don't find out about these people until much later on, it doesn't do anything to change their views of him. By the time the Doctor knows about this, he's already in disguise with Bruce on his side. Here's where we get the confrontation between Salamander and Kent, with it being revealed that they were originally in it together, but Salamander turned on Kent. So this is a cool twist, and making Kent a twist villain at the last moment who's been trying to regain his power is unexpected, although it doesn't feel exactly set up. Like I can't remember any hints towards this, or even hinting at a history between the two of them. Their only history has been Kent saying that he knew about Salamander's evil doings and was gotten out of the way because of it. But more importantly than this sudden twist, this is the only time in the serial which the audience is tricked into thinking the Doctor is Salamander, and it just doesn't work. So as explained before, Salamander locked himself in the record room and so couldn't be accessed from the outside. Seemingly he unlocked the doors and got out without anyone noticing and proceeded to completely disappear, but was in the area so he could be injured by the explosion at the end. To make this worse, the record room was also guarded and everyone was paying attention to it, as everyone knew Salamander was in there, meaning the only explanation is Salamander opened the doors and escaped through the underground tunnel and nobody batted an eye when the doors opened. Nobody came out and then he seemingly went back in. The scene itself is fine enough as we get the Doctor tricking Kent into revealing the truth, but as an audience member I just can't believe the Doctor was in the record room. This is the only time the serial tries this on the audience, and making it feel earned is important. That's basically everything to say about the plot. I don't really have anything to say about the trio. Jamie gets to be a bit more action orientated than usual, with him acting as an undercover agent, but basically does nothing in the second half. Victoria is the same, but instead of an action hero, she works in the kitchen, but gets plenty of great lines, mostly due to her interactions with the cook. Notably when he asks her what her menu would be and she gets very excited about dessert. This is probably the highlight of her in the serial. The Doctor on the other hand does even less. Basically being non-existent for 2 episodes, it means that there isn't as much to talk about with him, and I've basically discussed everything already. His initial resilience is interesting and works for the character, with his better sense of justice in this incarnation. But that's sort of it, with him being separated from his companions for the majority, and only interacting with a few characters, it means he doesn't really have a chance to bounce off anyone. The smash plate really feels like the only moment of character from the Doctor in this one, although there is this humorous moment when the trio are reunited.
Only you made me leave it in the TARDIS.
It's a fun moment, but basically the only time they interact like this after episode 1. This brings us to the cliffhanger, or the final stretch of the serial. Salamander suddenly reappears and decides to pretend to be the Doctor by going to the TARDIS, which he somehow knows about, and asking Jamie to take off. Now Jamie almost does this, but remembers how the Doctor told them to never touch the controls, and his hesitance provides enough time for the Doctor to appear. This leading to the only confrontation between the Doctor and Salamander, which unlike in the chase is actually pretty well done, mostly because it was done on film, with us even getting a shot with both of their faces in frame. This leads to Salamander accidentally causing the TARDIS to take off while the doors are still open, throwing him into the vortex while the trio hold on for their lives. So that's quite an ending for the serial, much like with The Rescue and its literal cliffhanger, but on a much more dangerous scale. This is both a great and terrible ending, as it's a cool way for Salamander to be defeated with him being thrown into the vortex while leaving the trio in danger, but the terrible part is how casual Salamander is about the TARDIS. Salamander has only recently learned about the Doctor, and so it's lucky for him to randomly have stumbled across the TARDIS, which I'm surprised is in walking range of the facility in the first place. This is also after he disappeared for a stretch, and so this is his sudden return, and with his death in the vortex it means he's probably thought to still be alive and in hiding by the people of his his time. But the big thing is his lack of reaction to the TARDIS. When I watched it for the first time, I wasn't convinced he was the Doctor, but to try and convince the audience he is, they had to remove his reaction to the TARDIS's larger inside, which brings up the question of why he doesn't have a reaction. He's so casual as he walks in and just asks Jamie to operate the controls. He should know nothing about the TARDIS and yet isn't at all fazed by something we have always shown to have a dramatic effect on people. It's just unbelievable for the twist, which feels very obvious. Of course, Jamie's refusal is a great moment of character for him, but when the story has to bend characters this way to have a moment like that, it's very annoying. That basically wraps everything up. The serial ends with a lot of its plot points still left hanging, with the fate of several characters up in the air, presumably a decent number of the higher up ones being arrested by Bruce. The fate of the people underground is completely up in the air, but presumably a rescue effort is to be mounted at some point. But with salamanders still potentially alive from their point of view, it means that more than likely there won't be a sense of calm for some time with the fear of his return. Overall, The Enemy of the World is very different. It kind of feels like a pure historical, in the sense of it being set on Earth without any alien elements, although it's really going for a James Bond type story on a BBC budget and production schedule. The idea of having Troughton playing a double role really restricts the Doctor for a majority of the serial, which does give the companions a chance to shine. It's a good serial for Troughton's performance as he gets to play a double role, but with his limited time as the Doctor, we lose him at his best. It's a fun experiment for the show, and it's good that they tried this very different type of story. I'm not a massive fan of this serial, but I do still enjoy it, and it is another complete serial for the Troughton era, which it is still desperate for, especially in its first half. But with our trio still in danger, they won't get any respite, as they soon come face to face with an old enemy. With an attack on the London Underground, the trio are once more faced with the Yeti, but with a new ally on their side, can they defeat the Great Intelligence again? Next time, The Web of Fear.